So now let's move on to the next movie. So the next movie, it's another horror movie, like I mentioned. It comes out in a couple of weeks. Now I watched this on Monday. Regal Theaters has this mystery movie thing. They do it like every 2 weeks, I believe, like every other Monday. So you buy a ticket for like $5, and you don't know what movie it is, and you won't know until they actually start playing the movie. And I've been doing that for the last I don't know, like month and a half or so. I've seen like 3 of them already, and this is the most recent one. So they showed this movie called It Lives Inside. So it's a horror movie, indie movie, and they showed that. Now this movie comes out on September 22nd, and like I said, it's like an indie, very low budget movie and so forth. So I'm going to do a non-spoiler review of this movie. And again, like always, we have the positives and the negatives. So let me get some information here, because the filmmaker here is new, right? So this is his first film, and his name is Bishal Dutta. I'm probably mispronouncing his name, so I apologize. Not that he's watching right now, but okay. So I don't know if you guys have seen the trailer for this. I saw it over the summer, and the trailer itself didn't really grab me that much. I would say that this is the part that is the most positive, or most or the best thing about this movie. So the originality of the movie. So it's not based on anything, or at least not really based on anything. It's an original work, original story. The filmmaker Dutta created this original story, and it's within the tropes of horror films we're familiar with. And I like the fact that he used very personal experiences in shaping the cultural horror elements of this movie. So when you watch this movie, the filmmaker here, he's from India, and if I read some information from him earlier, and it looks like he did immigrate here and growing up here, and then liking and watching all these horror movies and things like that, and all the tropes regarding those horror movies like Freddy and all that stuff. So there's something that he mentioned that I'm going to read here. We have here, the story is influenced by Indian demonic mythology as well as personal story from Dutta's grandfather. So it looks like there's like some stories that maybe he was told growing up. Like I said, I'm not from India, so I'm not going to know these cultural things, you know, what is from the stories that the culture told, or I don't know which one is made up or not. But I thought that was kind of interesting that he used like his experiences as a person from India, and then implementing it into a story and something that he likes, a horror film, you know, things like that. So I thought that was kind of cool. And then when I was watching the movie, I was kind of thinking about that too. I was like, oh, this filmmaker, obviously he's probably from India, and he probably grew up here, was a horror fan, and he probably picked up some things in his culture that's like, oh, I'm gonna make a horror movie out of this, because some of these stories that I've heard are kind of creepy. It says, after I moved to North America from India at the age of 4, a lot of my social education came from watching American horror films. I always wondered, what were families like mine doing while Bruce the Shark tore through the Mideast waters? I don't know what that means. While Freddy Krueger slashed teenagers in the dreamscape, and while Jack Torrance chased his son through the maze-like hills of the Overlook. As it developed, It Lives Inside formed its own dual identity, much like mine. On one hand, it is a love letter to the community and culture that raised me, while on the other, it is a visceral experience that is designed to instill the same raw terror in its viewers that my favorite horror films instilled in me. So those are the positive things that I liked about this movie. Now, there's some things that I thought he should have done differently, but that's probably the main thing that I like about this film. All those components there. Another one here is let me see, is there another one? Oh, the family dynamics are also a positive element of the film. even though it could have been better. Kind of like, Blue Beetle. We have a family that's, you know immigrated immigrants, or from stories that we haven't really seen throughout the decades or so, and now we're kind of seeing these kind of stories, these different type of families from different cultures and things like that. So it kind of reminded me of that. So I like that. But overall, when it comes to a movie, the story has to be good. I have to be entertained. If it's a horror, it has to at least find it creepy. So now I'm going to get into the negatives of this movie. Okay, so I mentioned earlier, so we have those familiar horror tropes that we're used to and that we like, especially some of these horror fans. But I feel like they are overutilized in this movie, which lead to some rather dull, boring scenes. There are also a couple of typical characters in here that drag the film. It dragged it significantly, at least to me. And just in general, it had those cliched scenes that help the plot move forward. I'm sure you can imagine one of those plot devices to move the story forward, especially when it comes to a horror movie. You could imagine what might be those plot devices. I don't want to get into it, like I said, because it's a non-spoiler review, but there's a couple of those here, which I was like, okay, yeah, we probably could have done without that. But either way, it's done. And I recognize the difficulties of creating an original story that is both personal, thrilling, and entertaining to the audience. And while the filmmaker adds some cool ideas, because he adds some very good ideas here, some components here that I like I mentioned, they're also mixed with too many of those typical and predictable story beats in horror movies. So yeah, so that's what we got for this one here. And then also, I'm going to describe The Thing. Like I said, this is a non-spoiler review, so I don't want to get into details. I don't want to get into whether we see the thing or we don't, or what does it look like, or whatever the case. If you've seen the trailer, you don't really see anything. Okay, so I'll try to be as careful as I can, but just so you know, I'm gonna call it as The Entity, and you can take it however you want. So The Entity, I thought it was okay. The design, or lack of design, whatever you want to call it. And I understand this is not a big budget movie, so I'm not expecting some huge ass big monster or CGI thing or whatever. But it definitely did have some creepy looking shots regarding the entity, whether you see it or not. In the film, in the trailer, they kind of used some of that, which kind of worked in the trailer and things like that. When it's barely shown on screen, but it was ultimately a bit of a lackluster, so I wasn't a huge fan of the actual entity of it, right? Also, there's something that happens at the end that does not quite make much sense to me, and probably would have worked better if they had taken a completely different route, but I guess that's just me for that. So I guess that's kind of the negatives here for this movie. It Lives Inside. This is his first film, which is Vishal Dutta. Like I said, I'm probably mispronouncing that. Apologies, but I just don't know how to pronounce it correctly here. But this is his first film, debut film. And ultimately, I'll say that it's a solid first film for this filmmaker, Vishal Dutta. He definitely has some cool ideas. Maybe later on he can implement them in a better way, in a more interesting way, and get rid of some of the cliche things. And like I said, I know it's hard to create an original story and things like that. I understand that. So I'll get to the grade here. So as I mentioned here, it's not a great movie. It's a solid first film. It had its good moments, like I mentioned, so it's a stream it. So it is going to be a stream it, and I'm going to give it a C+. So that's It Lives Inside, coming to theaters on September 22nd. And that's it. That was the second horror movie that I saw this week. All right.